Well, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us for this week's panel conversation. We hold these panel conversations to get perspectives from local government leaders on topics around engagement, particularly in these times of COVID. And I'm really excited today for the panelists that we have joining us. We do these every week, and they really have served to benefit communities that are struggling with exactly the same kind of topics around engagement during the time of COVID. Here's how the session generally works. I'll do a quick panel introduction and introduce the panelists who are joining us today and allow them to kind of introduce themselves as well. And then I'll introduce the topic and we'll get into some of the questions that we're going to be posing today. The session generally takes about an hour, but it really ends up to be a great conversation with the folks that are involved. So let's jump into our introductions. I'm really happy to introduce Meyer, who's the Deputy Director of Public Affairs in Whitehall, Ohio. In her role, she works to advance positive community engagement, media relations, human services, and economic development. Megan's had over 7 years of local government experience, previously serving in various roles in the Village City County Manager's office in the village of Glencoe, Illinois, and in Upper Arlington, Ohio. She's got a master's degree from The Ohio State University, and also a BA from the Ohio Wesleyan University. Megan, would you mind just adding a little bit to your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that introduction, Matt. Very much appreciated. I guess, my story, it's still young in my career, and I understand that, but it has been really cool because I've come up through the communications world in local government and have been in city manager and village manager's office. And so when you do that, you really get a holistic view of everything that's going on in the community, because you have to boil it down for others. And so, as I continue to grow in the profession, it really is all about keeping the community engaged while making major policy decisions for our communities. I will throw out there for anybody unfamiliar with Central Ohio, Whitehall is in the Columbus, Ohio area, and Columbus itself is experiencing a major population boom. And something really interesting is half of those people migrating to Central Ohio are actually new Americans. And so, as you can imagine, it is a really interesting time. And at the same time, Whitehall itself is undergoing its renaissance. So when I talk a little bit about how we engage with the community, this renaissance that we're going through is actually really important to keep in mind. So I'll touch on that more later.
That's great. Thank you, Megan. I really appreciate you being here today. So thank you. Our second panelist is Mayor Carlo Demaria. The mayor has been in his home community of Everett, Massachusetts since he was elected way back in 2007, although he already had a decade of public service prior to that time, being on the city council as one of the youngest folks elected to office at the ripe age of 20. Mayor, you and I had a brief conversation yesterday, and I have to say I was very impressed and impacted by your commitment to your community and in just some of your successes around economic development. The Encore Boston Harbor project is, not only is it such an economic engine, but you were dealing with contamination and kind of the redevelopment of difficult sites. So thanks for that time yesterday. And I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us today. And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure, Matt. Thank you, and it's an honor to be on this panel with Jill and Megan this morning. Lifelong resident, city of Everett. Parents immigrated from Italy in the late '60s, and quick story. The reason why I got involved in politics, I was a criminal justice major at Northeastern University. Always thought I'd get into the FBI and go that route, and Bill Clinton had stopped all federal co-ops, and because Northeastern was known for its co-op, and they had a co-op program with the FBI, and so I deferred all my co-ops, and eventually I had to take one, and my next door neighbor, who God rest his soul, was a World War II veteran, and I was also his paper boy at the time, still doing a paper route. He said to me, "Hey, listen, the city council seats opened up. Why don't you run, get involved? You're always helping the community." And so I said, I went back and asked my advisors at school if that would be an option. And lo and behold, I never thought I would be in government this long, but 14 years ago, I ran for mayor because I just saw the the divisiveness in the community. It was just killing the community that I grew up in and loved, and the only community I really knew. So I ran for mayor, and 14 years later, we're still doing great things to help people better themselves and helping all walks of lives. So it's been rewarding, challenging. The Encore Boston Harbor was definitely a challenging time for me. It was very contentious, but I knew at the end of the day it was the right thing to do. It took a Superfund site, used no taxpayer dollars. We cleaned it up and brought a $2 billion resort to our community and 5,000 jobs and so many other things I'm proud of. Proud husband and father of 3 wonderful kids that live here in Everett with me, and it's a dream job, right? It's a 2-minute commute to work every day. I get to bring my dog with me, who's on the couch, laying on the couch right now, and I'm glad to be here with all of you.
That's great, Mayor. I got to say, and I probably speak on behalf of Jill and Megan, but when you're in an administrative role, having the opportunity to work with a mayor that is passionate and committed to their community, things just seem to go a little bit smoother when you have a personality like that. So congratulations on your long tenure in the community.
Thanks, man.
I'm happy to introduce Jill Silverboard, who is our third panelist. Jill is the Deputy County Administrator and Chief of Staff in Pinellas County, Florida. She's coming off of a very big weekend last weekend, where there was a lot of activity going on around Tampa Bay. Jill's been in local government and committed to public service for over 3 decades, and is also an ICMA credentialed manager, which is an outstanding recognition for staying committed to professional development. She's been serving in numerous leadership roles. She's been the president of the Florida City County Managers Association. She's an active member with the Institute of Certified Planners. I got to say, Jill, when I was reading your resume, one of the things that really impressed me was just the breadth of your job in the county. You seem to have your fingers in just about everything. And then when COVID came, you got everything else added onto your plate. And so your role in the county is complicated, important, complex, busy, all of those kinds of things that you sometimes take it for granted, but people should really appreciate the amount of work that you do and the breadth of your responsibilities. So thank you. And one of the things I do want to point out is that in her chief of staff role, Jill spends a lot of time with strategic initiatives, which is such a critical thing for local governments to be paying attention to. And it sounds like you've had some specific focus in on housing initiatives and those kinds of things that are helping you economically and just the whole housing population. And it was just very impressive, Jill. And I just really want to thank you for being here and would welcome you to share a little bit more.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And so happy to join you, Mayor and Megan. This is something I very much enjoy, is hearing from other people and learning from others. And that's how I think, at least for those of us in local government, we feel reassured that we have one another. So thank you for the opportunity. It's always nice to be with people who understand what we do, correct? As you mentioned, Matt, I think this is like, I'm into my 33rd year now. So quite a while. And yeah, I do serve ICMA. I'm on the Credentialing Advisory Board. I'm also on the Assistants and Deputies Advisory Board. And Matt and I were chatting about some of the regional conference work that's coming up, and look forward to that. And again, to participate in opportunities such as that, as well as this. Two of my passions at this point in my career, I'm really trying to advance women leading government. Working a lot here in Florida. The year I was president of the Florida Association really brought the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion to the table, and we made a platform statement. And I'm really proud that since the years since then, we've made a lot of progress, and we've chosen to do it a little differently than some of the other states in the country because we value our male counterparts so much, and they champion us too. So we've kept everything together as one association. But those are some of my passions within the work. And then, of course, we all do it because we're in service to our community. I will say then, in sort of wrapping this up, though, that after 33 years, this has been a year unlike any other. So, yeah, it's a good story to tell. And I really hope that we'll soon have all the challenges in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you're so right. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we do these sessions, right? Just to take advantage of your perspective, because it has been such a challenging year. So thank you all for being part of this panel conversation. I really do appreciate your time. Let me introduce the topic that we're going to be chatting about today. The topic is maintaining a sense of community in a socially distanced world. You know, just given the past year, as Jill was talking about it, the past year that we've all had, it's just totally disrupted not only our communities, but our organizations. And just given the unsettled environment, how do you, the idea is how do you stay on top of things that are so critically important to your residents in maintaining that connection to their communities where they have all of their investments financially, emotionally, recreationally, in all aspects invested. And because everything is so disrupted, it has just changed entirely the way and the possibilities and the barriers in front of getting effective engagement going on. The pandemic has just presented us so many challenges, and we all understand the value of having a sense of community. So how do you go about understanding where residents' perspectives are in this really interesting and challenging times? You know, I mean, even if you think back before the pandemic, engagement has always been hard. The times that we meet as councils and boards generally are in conflict with people's normal lively schedules. And there are people that just are not going to be prepared to get in front of a city councilor. There's all those other barriers. So even in the best of times before the pandemic, there were challenges to having effective engagement. And so now all of a sudden you push onto it the challenge of COVID and where everybody is meeting virtually, organizationally, you're meeting virtually, people are at home trying to work their jobs while they're homeschooling their kids, and just the opportunity to stay engaged and to contribute on things that are impacting them on a daily basis. Because as we all know, things continue to happen in your community out of necessity. And in the work that we do, that you just got to be creative and think about how you can actually allow people and help people to engage in the community using whatever creative solutions that you possibly can. So how do you become better listeners so that you can engage the community better? And so to do that, we're going to get into 3 questions. And here are the questions. First one is, how has your communication and engagement strategy evolved since the beginning of the pandemic? The second one is, how does resident engagement influence your success in maintaining a sense of community? And then finally, which tools do you currently use to measure feedback from a resident's perspective during these challenging times? So with that, let us kick into asking the questions. And Megan, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk about how has your communication and engagement strategy evolved in Whitehall since the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Thank you. So I guess my first word to the wise would to be, don't start a new position in a community 3 months before a pandemic strikes, because it's going to complicate things a little bit. So beyond that, when I was hired on last January, I was taking on a new role for myself personally, but they also had different expectations out of community affairs, in large part because of the demographic of our community, which is very diverse socioeconomically and racially. It is really interesting. This position has evolved from kind of a health and human services liaison to more of a communications position, and now general leadership and project management. So I was balancing what they wanted out of the new role with what the community actually needed at the start of the pandemic. So when I was thinking about this question, I really thought about it and framing it kind of in my 3 main goals. Obviously, the most important was to keep the community informed of the public health updates. They were getting bombarded with information from all different sources. So I wanted to be a great source for them to boil it down, make sense to them. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we did that. But then also to identify what did the community need from us, and to make sure that we were able to help either bring those resources into the community, or in turn to show them where they were if it's not something we were providing or partner agency wasn't providing. And then there was another aspect of this where we didn't want to lose so much of the positive momentum that we were building, before the pandemic. And we realized that we couldn't have a year of stagnation. And so our third goal was really to continue the engagement and excitement for some of our major redevelopment projects we had, while also supporting our local business community. We have employers large and small, and we rely so much of our income taxes generated by these businesses. We rely on that to continue growing services, to continue grant programs for homeowners, to continue our reinvestment into infrastructure. So we couldn't let that fall to the wayside because of the pandemic. So we wanted to engage the community on that too. So how do you go about that? Because those are pretty tall tasks, right? So to keep the community informed, and I'm sure this is common for your PIOs and your managers and your comms people out there, thrown into incident command structures from the onset, wherever you fell into that. It was a little odd for me because it was the first time I was meeting some of these people, was in these, ICS meetings. So talking to your police and fire chief for the first time probably isn't the best way to get things right at first, but we worked it out. And so really it was about constant communication. So we had, those conversations every other day at the onset of the pandemic of what's going right and what's going wrong with how we're changing operations, and what do we need to tell the community about that. And that's where I came in, was how do we tell the community about these things, especially when it related to our emergency services. So, 3 months in, I kind of had to work with what I had from my predecessor. And so, for us, that meant kind of an outdated e-update and an outdated website and no reverse 911 system. And so, you start there and you say, what can I fix? What can I do quickly? So immediately I wanted to boil down information for people. We put that into a e-update that we sent out 5 days a week. So it was all the information that they were getting from all the news sources, but specific to Whitehall residents. Boiled everything down, added in the resource information, highlighted local businesses, like go support your local restaurants. And so with that, it actually became extremely popular. When we started it in March, we only had 800 email addresses. That's what I got from my predecessor. And now we're up to 2,700, and those are very active subscribers. And so as things evolved, we were doing that, like I said, 5 days a week. But as we kind of continued to grow and things have kind of calmed down a bit, we now just continue that weekly. But that's that one-way communication. That's not really engagement, right? That's just getting the information out there. So really what we wanted to know from our residents was, what do you need? And so something as simple as a web form for us of tell us what your needs are, what do you need help with, grew into a new online resource directory that we launched when we launched our new city website this year. And in fact, it's been going so well that we're going to print that full directory and direct mail it to our residents here in a couple of weeks. And it's really just turned into, okay, so we know what you were asking for. We're going to make sure you know where to get it. But we also had some information, obviously, about the community prior to the pandemic, and we could take some guesses at what they needed. So just a fun fact, we know that over 30% of our residents are on some kind of social assistance, of public assistance. And so we took a good guess that they might just need some general basic needs fulfilled as the pandemic were hitting them, as, they're, either getting furloughed or laid off. So we actually took pretty much any opportunity we could to make ourselves a resource provider. So for instance, we found our way to the World Central Kitchen at one point. So my job turned into communicating about the pandemic to handing out box dinners every night, for 6 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic. And that just kind of continued to evolve, just an example of one thing. So really, we kept all of that in mind. And at the same time, didn't want the community to think that we weren't still moving forward. So, not to, get too much into the weeds on this, but we have a major redevelopment project that's coming online in 2023, right across from our newest redevelopment, which is the first time we've had market rate housing built in Whitehall since the 70s. So that for us is huge. And if that indicates anything about our community, which it does, I think you're kind of getting the gist. We wanted people to really be excited about both that new project that just opened and the one coming down the pipeline. So that's where we tried to have fun. You know, we engaged them with online surveys, with showing them renderings, really building positivity for the future. And we continue to do that in any way we can. So through direct mailing, through online surveys, through social media, all of that.
That sounds really great. I love the fact that how you're sharing that information with the public so they can get excited about something that's really positive happening in the community. And it sounds like your organization actually had a pretty organized approach. And I'm not going to say it's an emergency operating plan, but it sounds like you all worked really well and strategically together in changing and evolving your engagement strategies. Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely. You know, we're a community of 19,000 and our full-time staff, I'm going to call it maybe 120 off the top of my head, inclusive of our police and fires. It's a small organization, and sometimes that works to your advantage and that you can be nimble and respond really quickly. We also have a very strong mayor. She's absolutely wonderful, Kim Maggard. And so if something needed to get done, it got done. And so that really, it really helped, I think, as we were responding.
That's great. Mayor Demaria, could you share how your communications and engagement strategy has evolved in Everett since the start of the pandemic?
Sure. The good thing about being mayor for close to 14 years is that like for instance, our reverse 911 system, we have 27,000 subscribers to that. We're a community of about 47,000 residents, and we probably have about another 20,000 undocumented residents that are hard to count. So close to about 70,000 residents. But we used, of course, our churches, our food banks, our social service agencies, our nonprofits to get word out to everybody. Right? We used Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Just to get all information out. I mean, from day one when the pandemic hit in March, when we closed everything down, City Hall was up and running virtually. We never missed a beat. We had signs throughout the city asking residents to call 311 for anything they may need. If it was for food insecurity, or if it was if they were facing loss of job or housing instability. We teamed up with United Way, the CDB. We use CDBG funds to help our residents out. We continue fundraising for our residents just to. We basically just, we use every avenue possible just to get every message out to our residents. We really stayed in touch with them. Still today, we doing some great, wonderful things in our community. We do food banks on Wednesdays and Saturdays, where it continues to grow. I think we have residents from other cities that come, and we don't care, right? We all of our employees pitched in, our ISD facilities, police, fire, volunteers. We kind of transformed into working on all these issues, right? Working on making sure that deliveries daily. We do about 200 daily deliveries of groceries to our residents. We deliver lunch to us, about 500 seniors a day, hot lunches. We use our CARES funding for all of that. But the question was, how are we getting the message out there? Reverse 911, Facebook, like I said, our churches have been wonderful to work with. Our social service groups. I don't want to be redundant, but I think everyone in Everett knows that they, one call to City Hall for anything they may need. And it's been good. It's been good. It's been very challenging, as Megan and Joe will tell you. But I think all of us leaders really have stepped up. And we kind of took the bull by the horns. I think local officials really, when we were waiting for Washington to help us, we just kind of, like we worked with the Greater Boston Food Bank. We just pulled whatever resources we had in our budgets to make sure we helped our residents, and we got the word out. And people,
Mayor Megan had talked about the increase in the number of emails that she has available now, which Megan is really amazing. Mayor, what's your sense of the level of participation and engagement during the pandemic now that things are operating so virtually? Any sense there?
Yeah. I know I had the amount of numbers, but you can just tell by our city council meetings, public participation. Now that's on Facebook Live and on Zoom, that there are more residents that are engaged because of the ability to Zoom and to watch a meeting on Facebook Live, to offer input on what's on the city council calendar. My Facebook page alone, I messages from residents daily about the vaccine clinics that we're holding. Where can they go to get their vaccines? Do I have an exact number or how many people are, being targeted? I mean, I'm sorry to not be able to answer that question. I'm looking through my notes here, but I know engagement is an all-time high.
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't expecting a hard number, but that sounds like you've got a pretty good feel about participation actually increasing. Our research has really shown that the level of trust in local government has actually increased during the pandemic. And it makes sense if you think about it, because people are looking to local leadership on helping to get through all of these health related and just, life issues. And communities, I think, overall have done just an excellent job in doing the outreach and the needed evolution of engagement to meet those needs. And so I think you're really kind of verifying what our research is showing. So thank you.
Wow.
Jill, how has Pinella County's engagement strategy evolved over the course of the last year?
Ours has been a story very similar to what we've heard from Megan and the mayor, but we actually immediately defaulted to our emergency communications platform. So we're Florida. We're really good at hurricanes and tropical storms. We have the infrastructure. We understand ICS. We know exactly how to do it. We didn't anticipate that we were going to be doing it for 10 months, but feels like 10 years. So for us, the beginning was extremely organized and everybody was right there. We met with those same challenges as it related to, supplies, kind of how vaccines feel now in February of 21. That's how we felt about testing 10 months ago and not being able to get swabs or whatever it was. But for us, our communications platforms, using all the same kinds of tools, but we actually layered and created unique messages for very different parts of our community. Part of that is simply that we're much larger than the other two communities that we're talking with this afternoon. I mean, we're almost 1 million people in Pinellas County. We are the 6th largest school district in the country. We have many non-English speaking communities and residents that we always have to be certain that we're addressing. So we had a category that was communications for everyone. Didn't matter who you were. Didn't matter if you were a resident or a business or a visitor. I'm sure you saw the photos of people partying on Clearwater Beach early in the pandemic. Yes, that was us. And then we had this other category, and that was really about the message for everyone was consistent and has actually remained consistent to this day. So it's masking and hygiene and social distancing and being responsible and doing all those things. So that initial campaign continues even today. But that was something that applied to everybody. Then we went to target audiences because it was obviously in the middle of spring break, really tough time to be able to reach people, because we can reach the hoteliers or the restaurants, but we can't necessarily reach the people who had plans to travel here. We don't know. We worked with our airport, for example, on that a little bit. So we had targeted communications for people who were visiting. What should I do? Should I leave? Should I stay? That sort of thing. But even more than that, we had a targeted layer of communications for those levels of businesses that were impacted most by the safer at home orders, right? Like you can only have 50% seating. You can only do this. You can't serve alcohol after a certain time. And there was just this plethora of communications that was specific to those businesses that did that. At the same time, we had targeted communications to the first recipients of our CARES programs. We actually rolled our CARES 1 program out in early April of 2020. We were actually writing checks to individuals and families, as well as to small businesses that had been dramatically impacted by safer at home order. So that was a target message community. So we also evolved as things went along. We did all those things. We had a citizen information center. You can pick up, you can call and somebody answers the phone, they answer your questions. We did do a weekly address by the Board of County Commissioners chair, had a weekly address. We did a lot of Facebook Live with the sheriff and the county administrator. Now, not great two-way, but getting closer to some two-way and answering specific questions. We had daily calls with the executive policy group that included the schools and law enforcement. We did weekly calls. As I mentioned, we're very urban. We have 24 municipalities in Pinellas County. So we had to all be on the same page. And not only with our 24 cities, but also our neighboring counties, because we are Tampa Bay. People live and work and drive, all around the Bay Area. So we were trying to be consistent, staying on the same page, especially with the big cities of Tampa, St. Petersburg, and the counties. So that was really helpful to us, and so then we basically just kept adding platforms, tweaking messages. I think it was Megan mentioned earlier, the challenge of that two-way communication is always a challenge for us. The one-way pushing it out works really well. So one thing we did is we started using the outdoor platforms. So if we were doing a mask distribution or food distribution or a testing site, we also had people there who could talk with folks about behavioral or mental health. Did they all, if it was a testing site, do you need food? Those kinds of conversations. So we deployed a lot of people in the health and human services side to work in what they wouldn't normally be working in those locations. And that worked really well. We also were able to point people to the right resources and where to get help. So we were really proud about being able to kind of help people. And then I'll end kind of on a little happy version of that, there was a period of time in which the beaches were closed. And that was pretty traumatic for Pinellas County, pretty traumatic for us as an organization. But all of our trails and parks, regional parks and preserves were all open. We made a decision to leave dog parks open, but we had to close playgrounds because we couldn't assure that they were going to be sanitized and clean or used. But we saw our numbers of visitors to regional parks and trails went up by almost 30%. In the first 4 months of the pandemic. So that was another place where we could reach people. So, bicycle group riding by, hey, here's maps, or whatever. So trying to also promote all the things that you could do, because everybody felt like, I'm in lockdown, I can't do anything. All I can do is go to the grocery store or the doctor. What can I do? And so we did a whole communication strategy around, here's what you can do. You can go to this park, you can do this, you can, So anyway, that was something that we also thought, everything we're sending out is kind of that negative, no, you can't, or gosh, I'm sorry that you need X, Y, and Z. Here's where you can go get it. But this was hopefully something that gave people a little bit of, hey, don't forget, we got a lot of sunshine here and you can get outdoors.
Love that. That was great. I love that can do, here's what you can do kind of attitude. That's great.
Yep.
I'm kind of curious, Jill, with your 24 municipalities, some communities are probably trying to figure out how do they align with some of their adjacent communities on not only the pandemic issues, but even just collaborative service delivery. Anything that you could share on your experience around that regional aspect, working with other jurisdictions?
Well, we're really good at it. We're really practiced at it here in Pinellas County. And most of our beach communities, for example, have longstanding relationships and do already share in service delivery and programs. Our sheriff's department, for example, serves as the law enforcement policing agency for most of the smaller communities. Honestly, only 2 exceptions. So we already have some systems in place that allow us to have that communication. Our county uses a tool, though, where the county administrator has appointed assistants to the county administrator that have geographical assignments. And one of their jobs is to make sure that we're keeping these folks all on the same page. And I mentioned the weekly calls that include the cities. For the cities that have, sort of that kind of smaller to mid-size that have professional managers or, someone really involved, that's pretty easy. Honestly, our biggest problem was not having the smaller communities stay on the same page. It was the larger cities. It was Tampa and St. Pete who felt like they, they're big. I mean, St. Petersburg's over 250,000, Tampa's over 500,000, and they're big, and nobody knows who Pinellas County is, but they know who Tampa is. So my bosses did a lot of work to, and in fairness to the cities, I mean, it's all about doing good stuff. It was just, let's try to stay these things together. Let's try to stay consistent, and that can be hard because they have elected mayors and that are running those cities. And
yeah, thank you. And the whole aspect of, in the pandemic, you want to be making sure that you've got the talent of a county who delivers a lot of those kind of social service, public health kind of topics and issues. So totally appreciate that. Thank you so much. Mayor Demaria, let's go on to the second question. How do you think engagement influences how successful Everett is in maintaining its sense of community?
Yeah. So we wanted to make sure that people felt like they belonged, right? That they weren't in this alone, that everyone was kind of going through the same thing that they were going through. We really did, I think, just a good job of staying in contact with people. Like we did a mass distribution. We mailed everyone masks. Such a tough question. I mean, we just, I was out and about the whole pandemic, right? I never stayed home. Even though we're telling people to stay home, I was going down to the pantries, the food pantries. I was, manning the phones with the 301 staff and taking calls. When we closed our senior center down, where we do our lunches for our residents, I made sure that we continue, doing the meal deliveries. I was Zooming with different groups. I was Zooming with our high school seniors immediately, right after we closed schools, because March or April, May, as it was progressing, we knew schools weren't going to reopen, right? So I was Zooming with them once a week just to kind of keep their spirits high and to talk about graduation, how we rolled out a drive-through graduation ceremony. I just kept Zooming with everyone, Zooming with religious leaders, just really kind of staying in touch with people, making sure they felt like part of the community, easing their concerns about their job loss, or if they were unable to pay their rents and mortgages. We worked, of course, with our CARES funding, and we got money out the door to people immediately, small businesses, kind of like what Jill and Megan were talking about. I hope I'm answering this question right. I try to, to keep everybody on the same page, and just trying to work, just trying to keep having more meetings, right? I've done more meetings in these last 10 months on Zoom with people that I've never met with before prior to this, right? And so I feel like I just kind of kept the community together. We Zoom with the city council, the school committee, morning meetings, staff meetings with the administration. We invited other people into our staff meetings, so people can hear what was going on. Very transparent, just putting everything out in text messaging, emails. We have about 30,000 emails and text messages for our residents, which is a pretty good amount when you're talking. You have about 47,000 registered, 47,000 residents. So we just I don't want to take too much time, but I try to be around and try to be let people know that we're all going through this together.
Mayor, that makes all the sense in the world, and just that personal connection, particularly in your leadership role as mayor. People are looking to you for that leadership, and it sounds like you really have taken that to heart, and those personal connections, which I think we all appreciate, are probably is the most important engagement that you can do. It sounds like you really have been successful in doing that with your community.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Jill, how does engagement play into your success in maintaining your sense of community in Pinellas County?
Well, I'll start by saying that it is far improved over where we were, say, 6 months ago, I think. We approximately half of our resident engagement during the pandemic, we would have put in the negative column. and the other half was in the positive column. And somewhat goes back, Matt, to your introduction today, right? Like, we know people are very divided. We were almost evenly split between support and pushback on our safer at home measures. Our indoor mask mandate, which continues now, it still draws opposition from speakers. Now, it has lost some of its edge and quantity. We had 3 commissioners seats up in November for election, so there was another layer that was impacting the participation. So while our participation levels were way up, much of it was hours and hours and hours of people being, pretty critical of the Board of County Commissioners, pretty critical of the Director of Health, and just, a lot of representations without any basis in fact, and some assurance that I speak for the people, and like, well, these people were elected by the people. So, just like this weird dance and we can only do emergency orders here in Florida in 1 week increments. So we were doing this every week. Now we learned from some of our neighbors, hey, why don't you delegate that authority? And so that has helped somewhat. But the commissioners were like, no, look, that's our job. That's our job. We're going to do it. So the negative resident engagement really impacted our ability to sort of maintain the thread of who we are as a community. And, I think we got better at the community participation piece. We now can gauge on project basis, how much better we are at this and keeping people and letting them know what's going on. And so I think someone made the point earlier about being that trusted voice, or being that place that they know when they come to Pinellas County that they're going to get accurate information. And that's been really huge for us to keep people reassured and keep people on the same page. You know what? And they're going to be critical. That's okay. That they get to do that. But our information is accurate. Our information is good. So the other thing we found, just very quickly, kind of goes back to an earlier part of our conversation today, is that it was really easy for people to identify things that were missing. So what we were trying to do was also connect people geographically, and to do that in ways that made them feel more like a community. So we had some murals that were being done on some overpasses, some opportunities that people could participate in socially distanced, safe ways. We had some scaling of, events, because for the most part, special events were shut down, not doing any of those normal things. So we really did find that at the neighborhood level, participation tended to be really good when they were helping the people who they believe or did in fact live around them. So that's where we went. That's where we did things, in those community centers, those churches. And I think that's been not only helpful as a result of getting people resources, but I think that'll hold true somewhat in the future as well, is that people have met some people and gotten out. And so, I think we're still learning, but I would say we're in a far better place. The divisiveness has quieted down, and sure, a lot of criticism, but now we're into vaccine mode, and I think we're in a much better place.
Jill, do you have a sense for whether or not your engagement levels in the county have gone up or gone down?
We do. So we track the platforms. One of the ones that, and I don't know if we've mentioned it today, but we use a great deal, and we work in cooperation with the Department of Health, is on Nextdoor. So we are specifically using those geo-fenced areas, so we know, who these people are, because far less anonymity in that platform, and we know who these people are, and hey, how they participated and how they responded. So getting some pretty good metrics there. Obviously, our Facebook Live events, we get metrics for those, but we're still challenged, but overall, I mean, just participation at Board of County Commissioner meetings off the charts. But we know we've reached people. That's been a real positive. It's easier for people to give us their input.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, it sounds like, I love the fact that you acknowledge that you're learning as you go. One of the kind of repetitive comments that I hear in these panel conversations is that you're always evolving and you're always adapting to the new circumstances that are in front of you. And it sounds like that is a pretty good description for your county.
Yeah.
Thank you. Megan, how has engagement influenced Whitehall's success in maintaining its sense of community?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I think Jill really hit the nail on the head when she said that tensions have been high, and that not all of the engagement we've seen this year has been positive. We all have that list of, for me, it's probably my top 5 Facebook trolls, the people who really love me. And we all know who they are in our communities. But I think we all can take a step back from that and realize frustration is high, tensions are high, people are going through something really traumatic. And so we're going to disagree some, and that's okay. So really, when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about how do you keep the sense of community moving forward? So some of that was balancing being super transparent as we could be, sharing what information we had. But again, to what I mentioned earlier, to try to keep some balance between that COVID information with some positivity, some other things about the community and how we're still moving forward. So community engagement for us is especially important because in some ways our identity as a community is changing. We are going through this transformation, this renaissance I mentioned. In the last decade alone, our home values have drastically increased and local income tax revenues have gone up over $9 million a year for us with only a $30 million budget. That is huge. And so while that's happening though, and we're focusing efforts on economic development, we're really cognizant that we have to do so in a way that supports everybody in the community. We have a very high percentage of the population that rents. So making sure that we're supporting renters who want to be homeowners, and then supporting homeowners as they reinvest in their homes, thinking about it as broadly as we can and in ways that we can actually turn things into real investment in the community. So, something that's really been important in not leaving others behind is asking them what do they think is most important as we use these new resources to keep Whitehall's transformation going. So, I know we're going to talk about our engagement tools here in a second, but we just did our most recent community survey, and we conduct that kind of like a public opinion poll, so we do some sampling and we make sure it all lines up demographically. Something that was really striking to me, in this world of those NIMBY, not in my backyard attitudes, what our community told us was that their highest community development priority was actually increasing affordable housing in our community. Like, that is so strange to me, having come from some very affluent communities, to hear that the community is self-recognized, that they want to see opportunities for everybody continue to grow. Obviously, that's information we can act on as we think about regional growth and equitable growth. So, for instance, we have that major redevelopment I mentioned coming underway. We've already gotten the developer to commit to 20% of the 1,000 units coming online being dedicated workforce housing. In our world, that doesn't always happen. You don't always have that great of a relationship with the developer. And that wasn't because of some law, that was because of relationship building and understanding what the community wanted. So really to keep them engaged, we're just trying to stay positive, highlighting the new developments, both market rate housing and affordable housing, highlighting how our strategy is growing the pie for everybody, not how to redivide it. So as the new income tax revenue is being put to use, sharing excitement for what we're doing with that. So for instance, we just opened a new community park YMCA. The city was super involved in it, and it was actually specifically designed for our residents' needs. So it's after school programming, safe place to go, safe place to learn, increasing efforts to share that with them. What are the capital improvements we're doing this year? We've never really gone that next step. We've budgeted, but we never really tell them what we budgeted and how it's going to impact them directly. So really just getting them excited for what we're going through and letting them know that we're not going to leave people behind as we, come up with a new sense of identity.
I'm sorry. What an exciting community to work in, because you've got such diversity, but you also have just all of these great development issues and things that get people excited. And the fact that you're doing it in a really transparent and open way, that, and just kind of based on my experience, those are exactly the kinds of things that people start feeling pride about their community because they see a lot of the excitement and the activities going on. So thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to the third question. And Jill, I'd like to start with you. Jill, can you talk about the tools that Pinellas County uses to help measure feedback from your residents and businesses during this public health emergency?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I mentioned earlier was how hard we try to work with our neighboring communities and counties and try to all stay on the same page. So we have a group that's called the Tampa Bay Partnership, and they actually do have a survey and research arm. So we've been able to have the benefit of their work throughout well, prior to the pandemic too, but specific to the pandemic. That has, really been informative to policy decisions that the county commissioners here, the two surrounding counties and us, as well as our cities, mentioned Tampa and St. Petersburg, especially. So that's one of the ways. And they were actually, up until November, this was a weekly update that they were providing on data. So we could see where things were moving in terms of, mask compliance or visitors, and just, it ran the gamut to, do you think your city's doing a good job? So it was, so we were able to see not only what people were saying about us, but what they were saying about our partners and our neighbors as well. So that was probably something unique for us that a lot of places don't have the benefit of that. We do a citizen satisfaction survey and made the mistake of administering it this year in November. So our Board of County Commissioners just did their strategic retreat in January. And so when you look at, prior years to 2020, and it's just, it's this disjointed kind of, what happened? It's like, well, we had a pandemic and people hate you for making them wear masks. So, whatever it was, we have talked about the timing. Was that probably a true barometer in November? Yeah, it probably was, and so there's value to it. Absolutely. But it has taught us to take a moment and say, okay, does it make sense? Is that the right time of the year to do it anyway? We used to do November. The reason that we did November is because that is one of the lowest months that we have visitors here in Florida. So if you do it before Thanksgiving, then November is what people call Floridians time. That's, so it's, it probably was a good time, and but maybe not when you're in the middle of a pandemic, or you've just had this election. So that's one way we measure. We do, as I said earlier, we collect a lot of metrics from our Citizen Information Center, which we keep up. We have an on-call PIO that's 24/7. We know exactly who's calling and which categories they're calling in, and then we share across the data platforms with our sheriff's office, for example. Especially as it related to some of our business closures and some of those things. One comment I'd like to just share in this category is that the challenge that we've all agreed, I think we have, is that we're really good at pushing stuff out one direction, and it's more the PIO role. But how do we know that what's coming back is reflective of a majority, or how informative should it be? Sometimes you don't even know if they are in your community or your county or who they are. We have started having a lot of success being that more community specific platform where people do have to identify themselves. We are now requiring registration for people to participate at the Board of County Commissioner meetings virtually, because we had to go back to in-person meetings. The state made us go back, so we can't stay virtual, but we're still allowing virtual participation. But the commission's like, we want to know who these people are. I mean, we have to be fully accountable. So that has really helped us. And I think it has calmed some of the rhetoric. But we're doing the same thing with like our projects on OpenGov. We use OpenGov for specific projects. And, I've got a new big development proposal coming forward. We want to know if these are really people who are impacted or not. So again, that's just some examples. We do try to compile whatever feedback we get into something meaningful, and not just thumbs up or thumbs down, or that it is informative of policy or places we need to make changes in service delivery.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you've got such a you got a population that varies every day of the week, don't you? With the level of visitors that you have coming in. So having the ability to connect and to be able to separate out that information is such an important part. So thank you. That's very interesting.
And they're not, and just, I guess this would be true for any major city, but for us, the other thing that has happened is, even for our visitors, the dates are not the normal dates. So spring training baseball, for example, which is huge here in Arizona, right? It's not the same. They're not here. Normally they'd be here already, and they're not here. So we're we're in this sort of uncertain water, if you will, even with some of the things that we're still standing up and trying to do. And if you watched the Super Bowl last week, go Bucks, it was just different. It was not like a normal Super Bowl. So yeah, it is for us. It does change, and it does, and it's not consistent with what used to always be true at any given time of the year.
Yeah, interesting. So you have to adapt to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. Megan, let's shift over to you. What tools are you using in Whitehall to help you measure feedback from your residents and businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt. So again, like Jill, we made the mistake of doing our, a community attitude survey. It was due. We do them every other year. And so we didn't want to lose the longitudinal data. We wanted it at the right increment, but I think we paid dearly for it. But actually, it worked out really nicely. Our polling firm, they gave us some good advice, and we actually designed the survey in exactly the same way one of our neighboring communities did. And then we asked questions, not just about how we were doing generally, because we wanted those same questions that we've seen year after year, but also how were we doing, in respect to COVID, and how were they doing as a population? What were their stress points? Were they experiencing joblessness? Were they seeing an increase in mental health, either in themselves or their children? Were they having to teach their children from home? This is all information we needed so we could share it with our partner organizations and act on it where we can. I'm sure this is true across the country, but Central Ohio has had a fairly large opioid problem over the last couple of years. And so we've designed a program, it's called Safe Station. It's essentially a pathway to addiction services. You show up at our fire station at any time, 24/7, and you will immediately be taken to a rehab facility, which is actually innovative because rehab facilities are actually very hard to get into for a lot of people. So it's really been successful. So, some of that feedback we wanted was to know that, hey, we need to keep this program going, and we need to make sure people know about it so that if they're ready to get help, they can find it. So, that was really interesting. And it was also interesting, of course, to compare how our residents were feeling versus this kind of more affluent community, so we can kind of, figure some of that out as well. But then some of it was ongoing. Prior to COVID, we'd been doing a number of virtual town halls with our police chief as part of what we call the Safer Whitehall initiative. So he pretty much shows up and let people beat up on him and ask any and every question, from why is there always speeding on my road to, my neighbor, there's always a weird stink over there. You know what I mean? Like those types of things. But he takes it all with grace, and we found it very important to keep those going this year, especially I think as people were questioning their personal safety. And then out of necessity, unfortunately, the pandemic wasn't the only thing that hit our residents this year. We actually had 2 major flooding events in the spring. I'm gonna have PTSD for this, one in March and one in May. And we had sanitary sewer backups in hundreds and hundreds of homes during the stay-at-home order. So not only do you have to stay home, but you have to stay home with sewage in your basement. Definitely problematic. So out of necessity, of course, we needed to know where was that happening. We needed them to self-report. We needed them to know what resources were available to them. And we needed that data, frankly, to report to our county level emergency management association so they could apply for relief funds. And so out of necessity, that was one of those situations, a direct mail immediately, online forms to capture the data, emails back out to them. And then we actually ended up realizing the need was so great, we designed our own homeowner grant program to help people install backwater valves because of that data. So it was like very important to be able to capture that quickly. And so that's kind of the power of, our online tools now that help us do that. But again, it wasn't all bad this year. So we did do a couple project specific surveys that I would say were fun, or at least I think they are in my nerd perspective. We collected information on that redevelopment project I mentioned prior to having a charrette with the, design planners to help them integrate what did the community want in this major redevelopment project. And then we also beat ourselves up by starting a new garbage and recycling program this year. And so in advance of that, we collected a bunch of information about what did the community like about our past program and what were they kind of willing to see change. So, some out of necessity, some just trying to keep it positive and light, and others, collecting data that hopefully in 2 years gets better. So that's what we were up to.
That's really interesting. I can't even imagine the challenges of dealing with flooding and backups. But it sounds like the community really responded well. And if nothing else, it probably actually gained additional trust in the community based on the way that you responded to it.
Yeah, I mean, it is really hard, I think, to explain to a community why does a sanitary sewer backup happen and whose fault is it? You know, of course, they think it's ours because we're the easiest one to point to. And it's tricky in a community of our age. We've had not too many resources to reinvest back into infrastructure previously. And so there's an argument to be made that the system was under capacity, but it's a regional system. The water doesn't go to us in the end. And so it was really a communication challenge. We were beat up on pretty harshly, but I think overall, as long as you do your best to explain what happened, where can you, how can you get, through this? Is it going to happen again anytime soon? I'm not, any kind of a future mind reader or anything, but it really has been a challenge. But again, being transparent, communicating as much as you can, and being there to listen to them when they need to talk about it has also been key.
Yeah, but it goes under the title of What a Tough Year.
Yeah.
Thanks, Megan.
Yeah.
Mayor Demaria, what tools are you using in Everett to get resident perspectives on the work that the city's doing?
Well, Matt, you really put me on this forum with two of the probably best people I've ever been on a forum with. You're really making this tough for me. I wish I had my public information officer next to me and my communication staff with me right now. But I know 311 has been like an amazing tool for us. Like I said earlier, we have 27,000 residents that receive messages from it. The uptick in calls that are coming in. People calling and using it. We actually had to bring Lionbridge, a translation service company in to help us translate, because we were getting so many people who speak so many different languages calling us about information on everything from diaper distribution days to food distribution days to Chromebook distribution to our schools. So, people are definitely here. I mean, we do a pop-up food pantry and thousands of people online. We are tracking it on our social media platforms through Google Analytics and Hootsuite. So we track. I'm an old school kind of politician. I'm really I'm kind of like an urban mechanic. I'm a on the street kind of guy. That's where I hear everything. Everett, I think, is the most densely populated city in the country, or the third, with 3.5 square miles, and we have about 60,000 residents. So I can cross the city within minutes, right? So I do walk the streets a lot. So I hear a lot from residents, and I measure it by just talking to people in the grocery stores, convenience stores, the thank you cards that I get, the emails that I get from residents about, I've never gotten so many thank you cards and so many good emails from residents in all my years of public service. So if I were to measure that, I know people are getting the word somehow what's happening in the city. Like I said, we're a small community, which is good. A lot of residents in a small area. I'm very happy about that. That's kind of how that's how we're measuring it, right? Again, 311's been a blessing for us, having all those emails and text messages abilities and people calling in and getting their information. We post. So I don't know if I answered that question, Matt, or not. I don't want to keep going, but I just want to say, totally impressed, Jill and Megan. I'm definitely going to visit both of them because it seems like they're really doing a wonderful job. Again, just I definitely follow-up question if you have one following that.
Well, Mayor, I gotta say, I'm impressed by the commitment that you place on making those personal connections. And I didn't realize that your community was so dense. So yeah. And so the challenge of engagement becomes just a really important thing because you are so dense. And the value of those connections and making those connections on a regular basis is really an important responsibility that you have. Is your council working pretty well together in terms of that outreach? Do they follow kind of the same pattern?
Yeah, no, for the most part, we're all, kind of on the same page. Of course, it's an election year. I'm up for re-election this year, and there's a couple councilors who are considering running for mayor. though I don't know why they would do that. But so there's always a little pushback from a couple of them. And but at the end of the day, you know, my staff, my administration, they really have stepped up. I mean, they've made my job so easy. My chief of staff to my chief of police, chief of fire, the volunteers, the ISD, code. I mean, they've been amazing people. Just really, when this first hit, everyone was like, "What can we do?" You know, what you know, and the effort was we coordinate, you know, coordination. Even our stakeholders, even other mayors. You know, Mayor Walsh, who now is our Secretary of Labor, appointed by Joe Biden. Mayor Walsh and I are very dear friends. We sparked a conversation. We did the Zoom with mayors. We had the Greater Boston mayors 4 nights a week, just kind of every night, either with the governor, lieutenant governor, the secretary of you know, DPH on the calls with us, and we were just working together. I mean, really coordinating, working together as like kind of like almost like one state has never really worked together ever. I mean, we were all kind of in line, in sync, which was amazing, which was great.
You know, Mayor, if you're bringing up a really important point, is you start thinking about communities coming out of COVID and all the financial constraints that they're going to be facing. The importance of those relationships with adjacent communities as you start to think about how you can share services and do collaborative service delivery, those kinds of things. That all starts with the relationships that you build with those people that are leading those communities. So congratulations on that work, because that's such an important part of building trust. Nobody's going to join another city if they don't know who they're dealing with. And so those relationships, I think, are really critical. So thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm proud to say that you know, the mayors in the Commonwealth we really all work really good together, and we're really working really great with our governor and our lieutenant governor. It's been an amazing time, even though it's been a very stressful time for our residents and our families and you know, people in general. But the amount of work, the collaboration. Has been actually, Mayor Walsh said it before I know he's leaving soon. Though it was one of the toughest times for him, these meetings that we had with mayors was some of his best times he had in all his life in government, which was, you know, kind of you know, amazing to say, you know.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to well, first of all, thank you for all of those great perspectives. I really appreciate it. And there was a lot of just valuable info that came out. I would love to just open it up to you, and if there's any questions that you have of each other, anything you want to ask.
I don't have. Sorry.
Go ahead, Megan.
I didn't have a question, but Carlo, I just wanted to say this is my first experience working for a strong mayor instead of a city manager, and you're exactly the kind of mayor I would want to work for. I mean, you are boots on the ground, making yourself available to your residents, and I'm lucky enough to have that experience in my community as well. And so, you know, just don't don't underplay how valuable you are as a leader in that organization.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I just want to say this has been great. I definitely gonna link in with both of you, Jill, Megan, and I think Matt, we already linked in, and definitely gonna follow what's going on in both communities and or both areas, really, Pinellas County and in Whitehall. This has been great. I just thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Really.
Yeah, you're welcome. You know, it's all about sharing ideas and perspectives and creative solutions, right? And the things that you have shared, I mean, the personal touch and the importance of that in an overall engagement strategy, the use of the tools that each of you are using. You know, I'm a big believer on performance. And so the community surveys, even though it's been a really odd time, the fact that you're checking in with your community on where their heads are around the services that they're getting. Megan, just the exciting environment that you're in, which is the same in all your communities in different ways, but that really had a big impact on just the way that you can connect with your residents around the importance of what a local government does. Jill, I really applaud the work that you're doing in Pinellas County. I really love the geographic assignments where people have different geographical areas. I mean, you're in such a large jurisdiction that staying on top of it. And I think that people undervalue the importance of county government all the time because of the role that you play.
Matt, if I could just briefly say, you know, the other thing is we provide a lot of municipal services to our unincorporated areas because we are so urban, but I just wanted to give a shout out to my other panelists today, to you, because I do think as we started out, this is how we all learn. And I'm just a mouthpiece. I mean, there is a team here in Pinellas County and in our cities and in our neighboring counties and cities, and I'm really proud of the work that has been accomplished, and happy that I could share it. But I'm representing a bunch of folks here, and just really, really glad we could share some of our story too.
It's great.
I appreciate that.
Whenever I do these panel conversations, I always come away with a deeper appreciation of the work that local governments do, because that's every day we have the ability to impact the quality of life in every one of our residents and every one of our businesses, and especially during these challenging times. It's those creative things that you're all doing to make sure that people's lives are going as smoothly as possible is just such an important thing. So these panel conversations are wonderful to share those ideas and things that you're doing. So thank you for being part of the conversation today. Let me just kind of finish things up, excuse me, very quickly with following this session, we will follow up and get you the linked recordings of the versions. I will follow up with an email so that you have all of each other's information in case there is a question you want to catch up with each other. And I would love to connect with you over the next week or so to make sure that you're happy with your production, but more importantly, to get feedback from you on things that I could do differently to make this panel conversation better. If you know of some of your colleagues or other folks who might value this kind of experience, by all means, let me know about it. Because we want to continue doing these sessions every week going forward. In fact, we are now just going to be kicking on next week a second panel that's focused on law enforcement and the role that the community perspective plays in the delivery of police services. And so we're going to be talking to police chiefs and other leaders in local government in law enforcement for the same reason, just to share ideas and creative solutions. So thank you for joining today. It was wonderful to connect with all of you, and I really appreciate your perspectives and sharing the time.